This is a story about the fake Corrupted Ashbringer that could once be found within the game. In order to explain what a fake Corrupted Ashbringer is, I will first give a brief history of the real Corrupted Ashbringer and why this item mattered to a lot of players. As the name implies, it's a corrupted version of the iconic weapon, the Ashbringer. The Corrupted Ashbringer used to drop off of the 4 Horsemen encounter in the Naxxramas raid. The Corrupted Ashbringer is a very well known and sought after weapon for several reasons. For a long time it was the only version of the Ashbringer weapon that players could equip. It also had a unique RP event in the Scarlet Cathedral dungeon, and while equipping this weapon, the otherwise hostile Scarlet Crusade would become friendly to you, while the otherwise friendly Argent Dawn would become at war with you. The Corrupted Ashbringer was only obtainable in vanilla World of Warcraft up until the end of the Burning Crusade expansion, which means that a lot of people never got the chance to get this weapon. By the time the transmog system was introduced in the end of Cataclysm, the means of acquiring this weapon was long removed. This meant that only the few who had looted it during the brief period between late vanilla up until the end of the Burning Crusade expansion, and not deleted it, had the option of using this weapon as a transmog. But while the introduction of the transmog system created a lot of envy from the players who did not obtain this weapon while it was possible, it did actually bring with it a solution to the players who were willing to abuse or utilize, depending on who you ask, some systems within the game. See, Blizzard introduced a system for loot distribution in dungeons and raids, where players were given the option to trade items they had just won to their party members. To avoid abuse, Blizzard gave this a trading window of just 2 hours and restricted it to make the item non-tradable if the item was modified. An example of modification would be a shaman applying an item enchantment. For whatever reason, the act of applying a transmog to the weapon would sometimes not register as a modification, which allowed players who had the Corrupted Ashbringer to share the transmog model with their friends. As this exploit required both players to be in a group together, it was often done to low-level items that were easy to acquire, which were then transmogged and traded. The prime example of this would be the Cold Iron Pick from the Stargates dungeon in the Stormwood City. Some players who were raiding together and were willing to risk the item becoming untradeable if this went wrong would also do this to current raid tier items, which would make them seem very legitimate. Keep in mind that the player receiving the appearance did not get access to using the appearance for future items, just the one they had received. They would need the help of their friend every time they got an upgrade. Before this exploit became known to game masters, some players actually managed to convince them to restore their supposedly lost Corrupted Ashbringer, as it was common knowledge back then that you must have had the item in order to transmog it. While most of these Corrupted Ashbringers were eventually removed from the players who managed to trick game masters, there likely are still a few out there who got to keep their ill-gotten Corrupted Ashbringers. The exploit was eventually fixed in 2016, which means that from this time, no more fake Corrupted Ashbringers were made. But at this time, there were already a decent amount of players who had a Cold Iron Pick or similar weapon transmogged with the Corrupted Ashbringer stored somewhere in their bags or in their bank. Finally, the story ended fairly recently with patch 10.1 in the Dragonflight expansion, when the transmog system received an update. With this, every transmogged item would lose the appearance if the player had not unlocked the given transmog. While this was most likely an unintended byproduct of the update, it did wipe Azeroth clean of every fake Ashbringer, which are unlikely to ever come back. Here is some footage of a fake Corrupted Ashbringer disappearing into thin air as the player logs into the game after the patch. I hope you learned something new and that you liked the video, and thank you for watching.